Hello everybody and welcome back to another EPO video. All eyes are on Georgia, as we are less than a month away from the two runoff elections that will determine control of the United States Senate. Over the last few days, I've been working tirelessly on this spreadsheet on your screen right here, which gives you a weighted polling average for both races. I will be going through the methodology first and then discuss what the final averages mean in regards to the possible outcomes of both the regular and special election. In the white section on the left here, I have found and included the 8 most recent polls conducted for these races in Georgia. To go along with each poll, I have the date it was released and the grade 538 gives the pollster on their website. If you did not already know, that grade is based on interpreted bias and how accurate the pollster has been in previous election cycles. The most recent polls were conducted by Data for Progress, a B- pollster that is typically thought of as left-leaning, and then Trafalgar Group, which has a C- rating, not very high, and it was released pretty recently on December 4th. Trafalgar is probably the most infamous pollster on Twitter because of their history of being pretty right-leaning. They were miraculously one of the closest pollsters in the 2016 election cycle, especially in the Rust Belt, but they have been historically bad in congressional races, specifically the 2018 midterms, and hence why their rating is that bad. The only other really notable and recent poll to go over is Survey USA, which is an A-graded pollster, and that was conducted on December 3rd. If you have not already noticed, the weight I give each poll in the next 2 columns over is based on recency and grade. That is why, for example, Data for Progress and Survey USA both hold a lot of weight. They each have a good combination of recency and high grades according to 538. To come up with the exact numbers for these weights, I have an algorithm that sums up to 100, but that is exactly why you see these older polls and ones with worse grades holding less weight over the final polling average, as they should. Another thing that you will also notice is that I split the weights into 2 separate groups. The first one, which only includes polls conducted after the election, is being used for Kelly Loeffler versus Raphael Warnock because, as we all know, polls conducted before the election for that race had a number of other candidates receiving a large portion of the vote, namely Doug Collins. And so obviously including those polls would mess up with the average since the dynamic of the race is entirely different. That is not necessarily the case, however, for David Perdue versus Jon Ossoff, as that has basically always been a two-way race, and so that is why I am still using 2 pre-election polls there. All of that being said, let's dig into these averages. Starting with the regular Senate election, Perdue versus Ossoff. Incumbent Senator David Perdue leads Ossoff by just 0.07%, which can be rounded to 0.1%. He holds 48.49% in the weighted average to Ossoff's 48.42%. That is obviously extremely close, and about as far into the margin of error as you can get. Not to mention that runoffs are typically a lot less predictable. Also, Perdue may only be leading in 3 of these 8 polls compared to Ossoff's 4, but Ossoff only leads by 1% in 3 of the polls he leads in, while Perdue has 2 2% leads and 1 4% lead. Down below all of this here, you can see the unweighted average, which gives Perdue a larger lead at 0.4%. In this race, we should also keep the general election in mind, where Perdue received 49.7% to Ossoff's 47.9%. That is a pretty significant 1.8% gap when you consider the fact that Joe Biden, the Democratic presidential candidate, won in the same state. Typically, that would suggest that the Democratic Senate candidate performs pretty well, but Perdue ultimately came just 0.3% away from winning this race outright. Nevertheless, this race is extremely close, and we will see what kind of impact Perdue skipping another debate has, but as I've said time and time again, it will ultimately all come down to turnout. For either Democrat, whether that be Ossoff or Warnock, to have a chance, they will need the same surge of voters that gave Joe Biden a victory in Georgia back in November. As for the special election runoff between Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock, Warnock leads Loeffler by a pretty firm lead. He holds 49.4% to Loeffler's 46.9%. That is a 2.5 point lead, which is within the margin of error, but it does paint a much clearer picture than Ossoff versus Perdue. Warnock has led pretty steadily apart from these two lower graded polls that don't hold much weight in the final average. In fact, when looking at the unweighted average, we can see that Warnock's lead is half that of his weighted lead, 1.2 percentage points. And in the two most highly weighted polls, which means higher grade and more recent, he leads by 3 and 7% respectively. And that certainly contributes to his somewhat healthy lead. That being said, however, Loeffler is much more unpopular than Perdue as a senator, but at least she showed up to debate Warnock, and she has much more of the Trump base on her back than Perdue, which could help her if they turn out in droves in a redemption of sorts for their president. Unlike the other race, though, we can't make any assumptions based on the general election because it's going from a three-way race to a two-way race. The only thing we can do with that data is tally up the partisan split. Democratic candidates received a total of 48.4% to the Republican candidates' 49.3%. That is a 0.9% gap, exactly half that of the race between Perdue and Ossoff. Although it is worth mentioning that Warnock consolidated much more of the Democratic vote, that being 32.9%, than Loeffler did of the Republican vote at 25.9%. At the end of the day, we will have to wait and see, and more polls coming out in the next few weeks will tell us a lot more about this race. But more than anything, keep an eye out on early voting totals, which start on December 14th, as an indication of which party is doing a better job of bringing out their vote. And that is crucial in runoffs. Let me know what you guys think of all of this in the comment section down below. I hope you all enjoyed this spreadsheet and polling average analysis video. Make sure to like it down below if you did, as well as subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching. Check out more content from my channel here, and as always, tune in next time. EP out.